So, today we're going to talk about technology and imperialism. We have two daily objectives. Number one, explain how Europeans were able to colonize Africa. And number two, list and describe the technological innovations that enabled European imperialism. So, we spent the last few days talking about the Industrial Revolution. And one of the key takeaways that you need to take away from the Industrial Revolution is that it didn't just make life better. The ability to have machines and factories and produce things at a very, very high rate is also going to impact Europeans' ability to wage war. So, one of the very first technological innovations that is going to come out of the Industrial Revolution, as we talked about, was the Watt engine as a result of the coal in England. And this is going to eventually lead to steamships. So, prior to the steamship, we had this right here, wooden sailing ship. Wood boat, sails, powered by the wind. Very simple. Now, with the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the steam engine, they're going to start putting steam engines on boats. And boats, for the first time, are going to be powered by something other than wind or by oar, and that is by coal. So most steamships, the very first steamships, are really just traveling along rivers, along lakes, but eventually these things are going to get bigger, more intense. They're going to be capable of traveling across oceans. They're going to cover them in metal, like this ship down here on the bottom. They're going to put cannons on them, but not just any cannon, not the old school cannon these guys had, but cannons that are breech loading. They're very quick to fire. They're shooting rounds that look more like a bullet, so they're elongated like a football. The barrels are going to have spiraling so that they shoot accurately. They may even explode on contact. Much bigger difference than the cannon in this. Much different way to go around. So one of the very first times that the world realized, whoa, these steamships are no joke, is in the Opium War of 1842. So if you don't know what opium is, it's a narcotic. It is the number one ingredient of heroin. So opium is no joke. Opium is largely grown. Nowadays, not so much, but back then it was grown in India as well as the Middle East. There's still a lot of it in the Middle East. The British had India, and India is really good at growing opium. So the British wanted to sell opium and make money, because that's what the Brits do. They take stuff that other people make and then they sell it and make lots of money. But they don't want to take it back to Britain because it's heroin, right? It's addictive. It'll destroy your society. So they decide, hey, we can go sell it to the Chinese. So they show up, they say, hey China, we got some heroin, you guys want some? And they're like, no, that stuff will destroy our lives, it will destroy our country, we don't want that in our country. And the British say, yeah, well, you don't really have a choice. They take their steamships, they ride them up to Chinese ports. The Chinese block with these ships over here on the right, which are called junkers, but they're really just Chinese wooden ships with sails. The Chinese meet the British steamships with these junkers. The British absolutely destroy them. With their advanced cannons, with their steam power, they're able to totally destroy these ships, go up the rivers, and pretty much just shoot either side of the river as they go down, and just completely take over a decent part of China, and force the Chinese government to allow the Brits to sell opium and heroin in China. This is the very first sign we realized that, whoa, military technology has radically changed as a result of the Industrial Revolution. China also loses Hong Kong to Great Britain, who had Hong Kong for a long time, up until the 20th century. Second major innovation from the Industrial Revolution, quinine. So, Europeans began to explore and colonize Africa along the coasts, but they couldn't go into Africa because of the diseases, because of malaria, because of the tsetse fly. All of these things kept Europeans from going into mainland Africa. Europeans are terrified of Africa. They die. So, the thing for the Europeans is that they've largely colonized and conquered the rest of the world at this point. South America is owned by Europe. Large chunks of Asia is owned by Europe. North America is owned by Europe. And in South America, they discover this plant, and they take this plant and they create this drug out of it called quinine. And what quinine is really good at doing is helping to cure malaria, one of the biggest and most deadly diseases keeping Europeans out of Africa. So they find this plant in Brazil, actually. They take this plant, they realize it's got some curative properties for malaria. They turn it into a drug, as we can see over here on the right. And using quinine, Europeans are able to go into Africa, into the mainland Africa for the first time. Next major innovation, rubber. Just like quinine, rubber is discovered in Brazil. Rubber is actually the sap from the rubber tree. So they discover rubber in Brazil. It is highly prized. It is very expensive because it's just grown in Brazil. Now, once they invent automobiles, rubber becomes highly prized and very expensive. The British, they sneak a spy into Brazil. That spy has one goal, that is get rubber tree seeds. He succeeds. He gets some rubber tree seeds. He smuggles them back to Asia, specifically India. Remember, that's where the British colony is in India. And they start growing rubber in Asia. Asia is now the biggest producer of rubber in the world. So that got stolen from Brazil. So rubber, that's our third. Fourth, firearms. There are several technological changes that create firearms much more deadly than they had ever been before. The first is the rifled barrel. So if you think about throwing a football, you throw it in a spiral. That way it goes further and it goes faster. Guns do the same thing. Inside of a gun barrel are grooves, and those grooves make a spiral. So that when a bullet goes down the barrel, the bullet is forced to spiral, which makes it go further, faster, more accurate. Second, we have better bullets. Now before we just had like musket balls, literally just a little ball of lead. That changes into true bullets. So bullets are going to be shaped kind of like footballs. They've got a point at the end, and that is to better jive with the rifled barrels, which again is going to make them more accurate, much more accurate, shoot further and shoot harder. Third, we have breech loading guns. So if you think about a musket, you've got to load it from the front. That takes time. With breech loading guns, you just open the back, put a bullet in, close the back, pull the trigger, boom. Fourth, we have smokeless powder. Before the invention of smokeless powder, Europeans and anyone with firearms used something called black powder. And the thing with black powder is when you light black powder, it makes a huge smoke cloud. So after the first few volleys of musket fire, nobody can see anything on the battlefield. Not to mention if you're trying to be sneaky and you're trying to shoot someone from far away, you shoot, oh look, there's a smoke cloud, found him. So smokeless powder is, there's still a little bit of smoke, but not really any at all. That totally changes firearms. And finally is the Gatling gun, which is the first really automatic gun. There's a crank. Every time you rotate the crank, a different barrel fires, which shoots a bullet very quickly. And we're going to watch several videos about how firearms changed at this point, at this period, in just a few minutes. So take a couple minutes, answer your 2 daily objectives.